Welcome to commercialdrones.fm, the podcast that explores the commercial drone industry, the people who power it, and the concepts that drive it. I'm your host, Ian Smith. Hey everyone, I'm here at DJI's San Mateo, California office, sitting down with Michael Perry, DJI's Managing Director of North America. And today we're going to discuss a lot of recent news surrounding the Chinese drone company, DJI. Everything from recent product releases, the U.S. Army and ICE memos, the bug bounty program, and what DJI's role in the drone industry is moving forward. So Michael Perry, thank you for coming and welcome to Commercial Drones FM.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you so much for having me again. Second time in the DJI San Mateo office. First of all, let's start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into drones and more specifically DJI?
Yeah, it's a pretty funny story. It's a lot of serendipity. I was a film school dropout, so always interested in the latest camera technology. And after school, I ended up studying government and Chinese, and ended up moving to Asia, working in communications, and but always staying on top of the latest in camera technology. And in 2013, I started seeing some pretty amazing videos come online, and I was just thinking, my God, how are people capturing these shots? I remember one video was Eric Chang went out, I think, to Mavericks and filmed these surfers, and it was just so stunning. So I was sick one weekend and just spent the entire weekend looking at drone videos, and spent the entire time thinking, how am I going to convince the woman who ended up becoming my wife to let me buy something like this to play around with? And funnily enough, that next Monday, a headhunter reached out and said, there's this crazy Chinese drone company called DJI. Are you interested in speaking with them? And I was living in Hong Kong at the time. So I went up, we had a few conversations, and that's now been over 4 years.
Wow.
So it's been like a rocket ship.
Nice. Yeah, it definitely has. I remember actually just some statistics on the company. So at the Airworks conference you guys just have, you were up on stage.
Yep.
Doing the keynote. And how many employees is DJI now since when you started?
Yeah, so we had about 1,000 people when I joined. And today we have over 11,000.
So 11x in 4 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And just in terms of our international marketing and sales team, we had about 4 people at the time, and now we have over 400 and offices around the world. So
there we go.
It's pretty exciting.
10x even in the individual departments. So the majority of the company is kind of focused on R&D and engineering.
Oh yeah.
Which is obvious when you're just looking at the advancements in the technology that have come out in hardware and software,
yeah,
and in integrated sensors and camera technology. So anyways, DJI drones are pretty much everywhere. A report was released by Bard College recently, which analyzed over 900,000 drone registrations from the FAA. And it said that DJI drones account for at least 70% of non-hobbyist drones.
Right.
So commercial drones in the US alone, that's a lot of drones. This could present a safety issue though, correct?
Well, I think you're looking at the wrong number in terms of a safety issue. So it's not the number of drones, it's the number of flight hours. So, when you actually are looking at the amount of flight hours, I don't think anybody has that concrete statistic. We can extrapolate based on what we understand from our user base, but you're talking in orders of several millions of hours of flight time per year. And if you compare that to the general safety record of traditional aviation, given the amount of incidents that you've actually had with this technology, it's pretty remarkable how safe the operations have been. Now that's where we are today. You have to think 5-10 years out. As the industry grows, how are we going to continue to maintain that safety record? And that's really the challenge that we as an industry are facing. The recent Assure reports, I don't know if you saw, but the mid-air collision reports and the drop test reports that they had ended up emphasizing some pretty key statistics. I think the media ended up pulling out a lot of the most sensational aspects, which is that, look, yeah, a large drone flying at high altitudes, fast can cause a catastrophic error. But if you actually drill deeper into the information, the vast majority of a lot of the use cases that you see the typical person using drones for end up presenting a much smaller safety risk than people had originally thought. Now, that's not to say that there's not anything that we should be doing. Obviously, there's the first thing is education, making sure that people understand the rules and regulations. There are tools that we can build into the technology to make it safer and more reliable. That includes geofencing, which we've already done. We've started rolling out ADS-B as one additional sensor to let people understand their air environment. And then the other is just the onboard sensors, making sure that there's not a collision or the platform performs stably in more complex environments. So to go back to your original question, as you start scaling operations from 100,000 4 years ago to over 900,000 today, is there an increase in safety concerns? Sure. But there are tools that we as an industry should be developing together in order to make sure that safety risk doesn't become a reality.
So on December 12th, just very recently, this is last week, President Trump signed the $700 billion National Defense Authorization Act that restores the requirement for all recreational drone owners to register their aircraft again with the government for $5. So there was all that, there was the legal proceedings that happened, and then it kind of,
right.
Drone registration went away for non-commercial users, and then people are kind of doing class action against the government to try to get $5 back. Now, apparently, it's back
right.
due to this authorization, National Defense Authorization Act. So, thoughts on drone registration? Is this kind of something that is a tool that can help? To me, I'm going to answer the question, actually. It's kind of helping with accountability as a manned aviation pilot, kind of legacy pilot here. It's definitely a concern. And, honestly, a registration is not going to stop. It's not going to guarantee someone if they fly their drone into an aircraft or do something bad with it, it's not going to guarantee that they're caught or anything. But could
right.
this be something that helps accountability and potentially safety overall?
Yeah. So whenever just stepping back for a second, if we look at DJI's general position in terms of drone regulation, we always talk about two things. One is safe skies and the other is open for innovation. And so with any rule that's coming in, we start evaluating it from that perspective. Safe skies, is it actually going to promote safety? Will it actually help promote safety in the way that people are using drones? And then open for innovation is, are you closing off access to people who have very legitimate reasons to be using this technology? So and we're looking at this registration within that context. I think there's a few things that we look at. Is it an additional accountability mechanism? Sure. Yeah, it definitely could be. And I think more than anything, we understand that looking at every country around the world and every conversation that's happening within civil aviation organizations around the world, this is something that is coming down the pike. So we have to prepare for it. So a registration accountability mechanism, sure, absolutely, we support. Is this implementation the best implementation of it? Well, from our perspective, we want to make sure that if this is a requirement, how can we make it a requirement that's not a significant barrier to innovation, getting more people to use it? So that's why we really push for looking at weight limits. Something below 250 grams doesn't have to be within this framework. The mechanism for registration is really easy. So it's easy for people to comply with the rules and regulations. And, the cost is low. It's not prohibitively expensive. It's $5. So, if accountability through this mechanism is the way that civil aviation organizations decide to go down, then we want to at least make it sure that's as low of a lift for our users as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you know off the top of your head, does the Spark fall? I mean, the Spark's more than 250 grams,
it's 300.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So close. Okay.
Yeah.
No worries, though. Accountability. All in the name of accountability. Could have shed that 50 grams maybe, but...
We'll put it in the gym.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things I've been super curious about, and it's in the same realm of conversation, is how does the geofencing technology work on DJI drones today? Some of the questions that I have, and what I used to... at one point, the database, if maybe it still is coming from a company called AirMap based down in Santa Monica in the US. Where does the database for geofencing come from? And how often is it updated? And do you need internet to get like a TFR? If a TFR pops up, what if you're flying offline?
Yeah.
How does that kind of stuff work on DJI technology?
Yeah. So again, taking a step back, we introduced no-fly zones in 2014. And this was at a time where we were moving from a hobby space where most of the people using our equipment were pretty familiar with AMA rules and regulations. They're pretty savvy users of this technology, to starting to break into the consumer space where people were thinking, hey, this is cool, let me use it. And as that migration started happening, we saw that a lot of people weren't aware of what the rules and regulations were. So you started seeing videos starting to pop up online that were pretty concerning, where people were flying dangerously close to airports. So we implemented the no-fly zone concept primarily as an educational tool. So if you don't know the first thing about airspace management, you can't discern between Class A and Class G airspace. This is a tool that helps people understand that. So from that, regulators were pretty interested. Many of our users who were responsible users were very interested in seeing this disseminated more broadly. But at the same time, there's very legitimate reasons why somebody would want to fly close to an airport. Sometimes you're inspecting a plane, or if you're in a disaster scenario. We saw this during the hurricanes this past year. Yes, there's a TFR, but at the same time, search and rescue workers are using Inspire 1s to help find people. So how do we balance that between, making sure that people who shouldn't be flying are at least aware that they shouldn't be flying, and there's a barrier to prevent them from doing something unintentional. But at the same time, we're enabling legitimate operations. So this is why we led a revamp of our system from being hard-coded into the flight controller to being a little bit more balanced, right? So we had some IATA data that we put into the flight controller that said, these are the major airports that you should stay away from. But at the same time, we started integrating with AirMap for more dynamic, updated information that would say, yeah, this is a stadium during game day. This is a wildfire. But you're right that information layer is only available if you're connected to the internet. So if you're flying with an iPad that's not connected to the internet, you're not going to have that information layer. So ultimately,
the TFR, like the something that pops up immediately, but like the normal airspace that has existed for decades prior and exists currently, you'll have that still. But it's just the TFR stuff.
Well, many of those points, but not all of them. So I mean, ultimately, again, we think of this as an educational tool. It's incumbent on the operator to understand what their air environment is like. So it's an educational tool first and foremost, and then hopefully through the innovations that we've had over the last several years, we've ended up making it a little bit more flexible so that it can enable legitimate operations.
So, safety, accountability, geofencing, it all kind of goes together. And so in what I imagine is a response to all of these kind of previous topics, or even a sign of the times,
right.
One of your latest product releases was something called Aeroscope.
Right.
So can you tell us, what is Aeroscope? Who is it for? And what does Aeroscope, like, what does it actually do?
Yeah. So again, this is us responding to something that we started seeing be a pretty broad and widely accepted understanding of what the next generation of drone technology will have to include. So a lot of conversations have been leading towards some sort of accountability mechanism beyond just registration. So many regulators around the world are looking at UTM as an aspect of that. So the immediate application of UTM that most people are looking forward to is basically having some sort of networked approach so that all drones at all times are popping up on a map so that you're monitoring all air traffic. And there's a few reasons for that. One would be an accountability mechanism. So if somebody's doing something not supposed to, you can report it back to the police and so on and so forth. The other side is deconflicting airspace. So you have two drones that are supposed to be going in the same place at the same time. They talk to each other through this network and they avoid each other, right? So we saw some challenges with that. One is it requires a pretty substantial infrastructure change to the way you have to build a lot of infrastructure in order to make that work. You have to retrofit a lot of our existing technology in order to make that happen. So, and we also think that there's a long time horizon there, right? So it's going to be several years. But the immediate challenge that we've heard from regulators and law enforcement and national security officials is that they need this technology now, not 2 to 3 years from now. Aeroscope is kind of that implementation, which is to say, okay, we have a tool that allows you to understand your immediate airspace immediately. And you have the ability to see what are the drones in your airspace, where are they coming from, are they a potential threat? You're able to see where the operator is in relation to their drone, and you can have defined fields so that if you want to put in your registration number or your purpose for flying or any of these details, you can do that just so that if you're flying close to a prison, you can say, hey, look, I'm an insurance provider, not somebody who's flying something over the prison. And so we presented that as a solution, and it's gotten a lot of support from various members of the community, law enforcement, and regulators like it because it's a solution that they can deploy now. And just with DJI equipment alone, it can address about 70% of the market with an open protocol that we have where the same ID can be broadcast over Wi-Fi. That includes many other drone manufacturers as well. So that helps address that concern. And then in terms of our users, many of our users are commercial operators who don't necessarily want their operations going into a central government database for all time. If you're a real estate agency and you're looking at a real estate developer and you're looking at a plot of land that you want to develop long term, you might not want your competitors potentially having access to that information. Same thing if you're a dad with a kid who's flying in his backyard. That doesn't necessarily need to be logged at all points. So we think this is a good trade-off between what's available now in the immediate future and some of the more philosophical concepts of how this should be implemented down the line.
Gotcha. And so is that a product for purchase? Like if you're law enforcement or an agency, you can buy that product today? Yeah.
So we have started demoing units, and we've been taking feedback from many of the people who have been trying beta units. Ventura Airport has been trying it out and giving us some useful feedback. And so you'll see it rolling out throughout the next year.
Cool. Sure. And so one other product release that you guys announced at the Airworks conference over in Denver recently was something called Flight Hub. So what is Flight Hub and who is that for?
Yeah, Flight Hub, we started seeing over the last year, you really started seeing commercial operations scaling up for businesses where it's no longer just a few guys in the R&D lab who understand the potential for drones. It's actually field operators saying, hey, this is pretty cool. This is a pretty useful technology. The challenge is that when you're trying to scale that type of operation across a large enterprise or even a small to medium enterprise, you start having a data management challenge where you're not sure who's doing what. You need logging mechanisms. You need to be able to assign tasks. You may even want to be able to monitor multiple drones simultaneously in their operations. Flight Hub is designed to take all of that information and compile it into one dashboard so that you can have a fleet management tool to oversee the entire operations of a business fleet of drones. So if I'm out in the field, I can be telling the guy at our headquarters where I am, what I'm doing with my drone. I can have a logging mechanism just so that our legal and insurance team are satisfied that we're compliant with whatever the rules are. He can actually send me a message in the field and say, actually, don't bother with that mapping mission. We just did that last week, but I do need photos of this, that, and the other site. So we're pretty excited about this tool because it ends up addressing some of the specific scalability challenges that we've heard from some of our larger customers.
It's also, being a kind of a business-focused podcast, a nice way to get into the SaaS business as well. So software as a service. So it's a monthly fee. I think it's in beta soon, I believe.
Yeah.
The status of that product. And now, a quick word from our sponsors. Commercial Drones FM is supported by Deveron UAS. Deveron UAS is building a standardized drone network for farmers all across North America, offering on-demand, near real-time field-level data when you want it. To learn more about how you can achieve scalable data collection in agriculture, visit deveronuas.com. That's deveronuas.com. Hey, thanks for listening to Commercial Drones FM. I think it's about time I give away a drone. How about a DJI Spark? Well, sounds good to me. Want to win the brand new DJI Spark? Head over to commercialdrones.fm/spark and enter the super easy giveaway contest, and I'll pick the lucky winner on February 5th. Oh, and don't forget to thank one of the 100+ Commercial Drones FM Patreon supporters, because with their incredibly selfless monthly donations, they are the ones making this drone giveaway possible. To see what you get for supporting this podcast and to also donate, go to patreon.com/dronespodcast. But don't forget, to win the DJI Spark, you can quickly enter at commercialdrones.fm/spark. Okay, back to the show. Cool. So, naturally, DJI, by being the largest drone company, you're also under the largest microscope, as we all know. So in August of 2017, there was a U.S. Army memo which circulated, and it made its way into the media, asking the Army members, so anyone in the Army, to stop the use of DJI drones immediately, citing concerns over cyber vulnerabilities. In response to that, or what seemed to be a response to that, it seemed that DJI announced a local data mode option, so keeping all the data while the drone's flying, like not sending anything out into the internet, and also a bug bounty program. So first, what I want to talk about is the local data mode. So how does that work? Why was that created, and how does that relate to this Army memo? What's kind of going on with that?
Yeah, what's interesting about that is it's that the Army memo generally was talking about cyber vulnerabilities, and we've not seen the ARL or NRL report that they've cited in Army Research Lab or Navy Research Lab memos that they've cited in the report. So we don't know what they're responding to specifically. They were just talking about cyber vulnerabilities as a larger bucket. And to our mind, that could be one of two things. One is about the safety of the integrity of the data that's collected by the drone, or the ability for malicious actors to attack the drone while it's in operation. So the two announcements that you were talking about were actually things that were in progress ahead of that memo, just because there are challenges that we anticipated earlier this year, but we ended up having to accelerate the announcement of that just to show, hey, look, we're working on these things. Local data mode actually came out of a request from over a year ago when we were working with some of our enterprise clients who said, look, I understand that DJI has the ability to capture flight logs and can upload pictures and videos to SkyPixel. And we've done a lot of work to help show that's a manual operation, that people have to opt into that decision making. Like, I upload my flight log, right? So we demonstrated that to this client, and they said, okay, got that. It's not being passively pulled to someplace else. That's fine. But we also know that a lot of the operators in the field using your equipment might accidentally push a button that they're not supposed to. And there are OPSEC requirements in terms of how they handle data. They cannot even accidentally upload information that's shared with us, right? So they said, can you just take that out to make sure that there's no potential of any communication of sensitive data from our operations to anything related to DJI.
Cut it off from the internet. Exactly.
So we started betaing that over a year ago. And so we were in a conundrum about, well, how widely should we disseminate this product? But in earlier this year, we started getting that request more frequently from our enterprise customers, just saying, hey, look, not knowing your data management protocols, can you just implement this generally for us? So it was a priority for us to start rolling this out sooner rather than later. And so we've already deployed that for the DJI Pilot app.
Gotcha. And so that kind of, there's like an ulterior kind of point here, and something that I noticed. So in the Flight Hub release, obviously Flight Hub is an internet-based platform. It's software as a service. It's based in the cloud. There was a call out for obviously servers located in the US in like the features. It was like US-based servers. So what servers, or can you share like server locations? What are different server, like US and non-US? Obviously, there's people outside of the US listening to this, and obviously, China comes up as well. Yeah. And so there's people in China too that are using DJI drones that are, non-affiliated with the government, et cetera. So everyone kind of has their own preference of where should these servers be based. But can you talk a little bit about server locations and, where that data would be going?
Obviously, as a global company, we have servers all over the world, and that includes an AWS server here in the US. So when somebody uploads their data to DJI, that's stored on an AWS server. American users, when they upload something to DJI, it's stored on an AWS server here in the States. And again, that's primarily used for our customer service team. So if you have crashed your drone and you don't know why, you can upload your flight log, and we can look at the details of the operation and say, okay, yes, there was a sensor error here where there shouldn't have been, or you know what, actually you said that there was a malfunction, but we can see that you were actually moving your stick the wrong way and crashed into that tree. So that information is typically really useful for us to resolve customer service cases faster. But again, that information is stored locally here. What you'll see over time, and this is certainly true in Europe right now, is the increasing requirement to store and only manage data locally. So we have to be in compliance with that, as any major tech company has to be. And we'll be implementing that philosophy in our data management moving forward.
So Michael, how is DJI looking at data security development within your drone platforms?
Yeah, it's DJI started off as a hobby-based community, right? So we were building components so that people could build their own drones. And as we started moving into the consumer space, we had to start thinking in terms of software for consumers. So we made a lot of tools so that people could share their information a lot more easily. So that would include posting photos and videos to SkyPixel or live streaming their videos to Facebook. Now, as we're moving into a more enterprise field, we're having to step up our data security game. We have to start thinking about how large companies are using software to capture and store data. And I think that's not a unique challenge for DJI. Several other consumer electronics categories have had to deal with the same issues. That includes smartphones, as you probably know, it wasn't until I think the iPhone 5 that iPhones were accepted on military bases. It wasn't until later versions of the iPhone where you could start bringing an iPhone to work rather than having to work off a BlackBerry. And even still, there's that segmentation between that consumer technology, which is the iPhone. And then there are specific applications where you have to use a BlackBerry, even now, because of the level of encryption. So I think DJI is finding our role within that.
Yeah, and you guys definitely are not the only one in the drone space dealing with that, as the whole industry, from hardware to software, seeing and everything grow. New concerns are popping up all over the place about data security and, what's your protocol for audit logs, and is there single sign-on, and is there encryption, and, how many bits is the encryption? Is it 128 or is it 256? Is it AES, and all these different things. So the next thing was the bug bounty program. So there was a little, there's a lot of stories about this that circulated. And so the stories were claiming that a security researcher, Kevin Finisterre, who took part in the DJI bug bounty program, which I presume, as you just mentioned, was, in progress, obviously. Like, this is a bug bounty program, first of all, isn't just a DJI thing. Like, Microsoft does this, Google does this, Yahoo does this, if anyone uses Yahoo anymore. Actually, I use them for fantasy football. But anyways, they make the best fantasy football software. So anyways, bug bounty program in response to this. Kevin Finisterre was someone who participated in it, apparently uncovered some vulnerabilities, and then claims that he received legal threats from DJI. So what's the deal with the bug bounty program situation and the Kevin thing and the legal threats, etc.? I mean, what's going on here with this story? Yeah.
Again, to your point, this is something that we had been considering for a while, particularly because earlier this year, there was a lot of conversations online about people hacking the no-fly zone system. And a lot of the tools that enabled that hack against the no-fly zone system had been flagged to DJI, but not through a formalized channel.
That's right. There were you could buy, I remember covering that in like Q2 or something, or Q3, you could buy like a jailbroken DJI drone from like some like unauthorized third-party retailer that could like fly wherever it wanted because they were hacking in.
Yeah. So, the frustrating thing to us was that we didn't have a formalized channel for people to let us know that there was a problem. And that's, a challenge for us as an organization, because we have to be able to respond to some of those potentially malicious attacks against our systems. So we started talking about creating a bug bounty to respond to that specifically, and then again talking about this broader bucket of cyber vulnerabilities. We wanted to provide a mechanism faster so that, in case this was one of the key concerns that some of our users had about our equipment, we wanted to show that we were doing due diligence. Unfortunately, the announcement ended up preceding a lot of the necessary infrastructure in order to make that sort of system work. So in particularly the early days of that program, there was a mismatch of expectations between the DJI side and the security researcher side. And I won't go into the specifics of Kevin's case in particular, but I would just say that generally at that early stage, there's just a total mismatch of expectations. But now we have implemented a formalized terms of agreement. We've set up a website, and as of today, we have had over 25 successful bounty claims through the program, and again from researchers from all over the world, in the U.S., Europe, Asia, that are flagging issues that help us make the system more reliable. And I think that's not only a benefit for us as a company, but also for our users.
So perhaps one of the most surprising stories of late. So this is our like final story, like news media kind of like roundup here is the memo from the Los Angeles office of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Bureau, which is known as ICE, ICE.
Yeah.
It claims that they have, quote unquote, moderate confidence that data on U.S. critical infrastructure is being sent back from DJI drones and made available to the Chinese government.
Yeah.
Is this true?
So categorically, no, that is not true. So did you actually read the report?
The whole ICE report, I did not read the whole ICE report. I rely, just as many in the world, on what the media tells me in the actual, just in the articles and what they summarize and the quotes that they pull out.
Yeah. So if you read the full report, you'll see that all of the report's claims are based on one unidentified source who apparently has deep knowledge of the drone industry. But if you start actually looking through some of the specifics of what this source is claiming, it's pretty outrageous. I mean, the claims range from like the small and insignificant that are off to, pretty large misses, like saying that Unique and Parrot are no longer manufacturing, that we've sold X amount of units that have shipped through this port that don't match our numbers for what we actually sell, and even more outlandish claims like that our systems do facial recognition even when the system's turned off.
That's very impressive if it were true.
Yeah, and there's even this one pretty outrageous story about this couple who had a DJI drone on their vineyard, and they flew it, and a few weeks later, some Chinese investors started showing up looking at land around their vineyard, and they said, "Oh, well, that must be DJI selling this information to somebody that they shouldn't." And all of that's really hard to stomach. So that's the basis on which this report is coming from, which is a pretty
unidentified individual,
unreliable, unidentified individual. That said, we have to make sure that we're addressing the concerns systematically. And that's an area where we have to do better. We have to be clearer about what we do and what we don't do. And the easiest defense that we can point to right now is just saying, DJI doesn't want your data. We've provided a ton of tools in order to make sure that you don't give us your data. That includes, making sure that you can fly without an internet connection. You can, if you don't want your information being uploaded to DJI, you can literally just switch your tablet into airplane mode. We could make it, a company that was really focused on the things that this paper claims could say, well, you have to have an internet connection in order to make this thing work. That's not the case with us. Furthermore, we introduced local data mode so that a user who is concerned about their data security can opt into a system so that they don't contact DJI servers at all. But more fundamentally, we do have to do a better job to show how people's data are being managed when it comes to DJI. And that's something that we'll be working through 2018 to help communicate to our customers.
And 2018 is poised to be just a massive year for the drone industry in general. And obviously, DJI leading the pack there. And so that's a great segue into kind of, the final question here is, where do you go from here? What's DJI's role in the industry as we look forward to 2018 and beyond? It's not easy being always, the top dog in the top of the totem pole or the food chain, et cetera. I mean, what is the role that DJI plays in this industry as a whole for all of us? We're talking, Parrot, Unique included. I mean, setting the standard. What's the way forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot that we'll be pushing forward in 2018. But I'd say the main thing that DJI is focused on uniquely compared to everybody else in the field is by creating a really open and broad platform that anybody can develop on top of. So what DJI is really focused on more than anybody else is cracking the top of the funnel, pulling in people who are just using a drone for fun with a Spark, taking fun photos and videos, down to very serious industrial applications for drones. And throughout that entire process, we have an open SDK so that you can develop your own applications on top of the system. We have we have a variety of sensors that can be integrated on board, processors that can be added to the system to make them even more powerful, more robust for a wider variety of applications. And what we're seeing is that as those solutions become more and more mature, you see businesses spinning off from them. You've got businesses creating smarter capture apps so that people can do more intelligent photo and video collection and sharing, down to very narrow, specific drone application scenarios. And that could be software, that could be services, or it could be hardware, where people are creating drones that have a very specific and narrow use case. I think DJI's role within that is just making sure that everybody has access to the technology and we can continue raising the level of what the industry can do as a whole.
Totally agree. I mean, if you look past even the amazing gimbal technology, the OcuSync or the Light Bridge, the hardware in general that DJI has introduced, the SDK is just such a powerful tool that you guys have developed, and it's been instrumental, I feel, for the growth of the industry and just DJI itself as well.
Yeah, if you look back in 2014, geez, it's been already 3 years when we announced the Inspire 1, and all the media coverage, all the focus was on the new platform, right? It's cool, it's sexy, it transforms, wow. But the fundamental thing that we announced that day was the SDK. And it's the same thing with Flight Hub earlier this year. I mean, everyone's focused on new hardware or new announcements, but really Flight Hub is a game changer for how enterprises use our technology. And our hope is that becomes a platform that more and more businesses can enter into the space and create the next multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar drone startup.
Maybe the podcast will be a multi-billion-dollar drone startup. I don't know.
Gotta get Casper, man.
Yeah. Hey, Casper or Blue Apron. If any of you want to advertise, just hit me up. Ian at commercialdrones.fm. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Michael. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for having me again at the DJI office here in San Mateo. Listeners, you can follow DJI's main account on Twitter at DJI Global. You can also check out their DJI Enterprise division on Twitter at DJI Enterprise. And while you're at it, be sure to follow Commercial Drones FM on Twitter at Drones Podcast and on Facebook at facebook.com/Drones Podcast. Also, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. We're now on Spotify, which is amazing. That was kind of difficult and a long time coming. And also Google Play Music. But really, wherever you listen to podcasts, you'll find Commercial Drones FM there. So, before we cut off the mics, any last parting thoughts that you want to leave us with, Michael?
We're really excited about 2018. Make sure that... So we're going into the holidays period, right? And there's always a lot of hysteria about new people getting drones during the holiday.
Yes.
Just a reminder to all the folks listening to this show, be a good neighbor and make sure that you let your neighbors know what they should and shouldn't be doing with a drone. Let's be an inclusive, welcoming community to the new pilots that are coming on board, but also making sure that we're doing a great job educating them about how to use this technology safely. The drone community is unparalleled, unrivaled. It's insane that the amount of people that are involved in this and passionate about it. So yes, be a good neighbor, be a good drone advocate, and help people out flying safe and responsibly. So thank you so much for listening. Fly safe and catch you next time. Cheers.